In this segment of the video, we're going to show you the setup of the Bobcat straight out of the box. And one of the most important things we need to do to start is to figure out where you're going to place your pump. And once you know where you're going to place your pump, you're going to want to set up the ground wire. The ground wire needs to be put to a good earth ground, and a good way to know you have a good earth ground is to have a qualified electrician check and make sure that the ground is good. The second part we're going to look at is going to be our siphon assembly. The siphon assembly attaches right to the base of the fluid section. And you want to make sure this is up good and tight onto the fluid section so you can't draw any air out, causing distortions in your spray pack. The next item we're going to set up is going to be the fluid hoses and air hoses. On the Bobcat gun, we use a 1/8 inch yellow fluid hose. On this hose, it requires less material in the hose, so it's a lot faster flush out and less material for flush out. Plus, it's a lot more flexible when you're spraying. On the ends of the Bobcat hose, we've got a 3/8 on the air hose on one end and 1/4 inch for the fluid. The fluid connects right up to the fluid outlet on the fluid section, just under the wall mount bracket that's on your pump. Once you get this on, you want to make sure it's good and tight, and all these connections are tight. The air side we're going to bring up and put onto the atomizing air regulator on the pump. And we'll want to make sure that all these fittings are good and tight. The second thing we're going to set up is putting the gun onto the hose. On the Bobcat gun, the metal inlet here is your fluid inlet. Your air inlet comes into the base of the gun. On the gun it says air inlet. The red hose goes on to the air inlet, and your yellow fluid hose goes on to the gun fluid inlet. Now that we've gone through and we've hooked up the fluid lines for the Bobcat setup and the siphon assembly, you always want to go back just before you start to flush the system and make sure that all these connections are good and tight. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to flush out with solvent any water from the testing process with the pump. When we test these under pressure, we use water just to make sure there's no leaks and that the pump is working properly. So if you're going to be using a solvent-borne material, what we're going to do is we're going to solvent flush it with lacquer thinner or acetone. So at this point, we're going to flush the system out and show you how we do that. But like we discussed in the safety aspect, we're going to remove the tip air cap and air cap retainer ring from the gun. That way we can't have any chance of any static. Second thing we're going to do now is we're going to take and place our siphon assembly into our lacquer thinner. Once we have that placed in the lacquer thinner, we want to make sure that the main inlet, which is right here where the main air comes into the pump, on the right hand side where your pump fluid pressure regulator is shut off. Then we want to make sure this regulator knob is turned all the way out. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to look over here at the air atomizing regulator, which is on the left side if you're facing the pump. We want to make sure that that ball valve is shut off too, and this is screwed all the way out so we can't accidentally splash any material with atomizing air. So once we have the material in, we're going to hook up the main air line, and we're going to just flush out any water contaminants from the manufacturing process. Keeping in mind about the safety, we're going to push in on the button, release the safety. We're going to open up the ball valve, and we're going to bring the pressure up slowly until we hear the pump start to stroke. Now you can hear where the air is in the system. You can hear it start to straighten out. Now we're getting a nice flow of material. And we just want to flush this through just for a few seconds, because the yellow hose, the 1/8 inch Bobcat hose, does not hold much material in it. So once we reach this point, we got a nice stream of material. Looks like we've got it flushed through good. We're going to shut off the main valve, and we're going to drain off the pressure. Now at this point, we're going to take the siphon assembly, lift it out of the material, and we're going to drain the rest of the solvent out of the system. You'll be able to hear when it's drained out, the pump will start to speed up, and you'll start to hear the airflow. Once we flush that, now we're ready to put it into the lacquer. At this point, we've discussed about setting up for solvent-borne materials. Just briefly, I want to touch on waterborne materials. When you're flushing through and you're going to be spraying waterborne materials, all you're going to do is flush the system with warm water to make sure that any contaminants are out of the system. And then you'll be ready to put your siphon assembly into the waterborne coating and start spraying and do your setup. Okay, we flushed the system through. Now we're ready to load it with lacquer. But before we load it up with the lacquer, we want to make sure that we put our throat lube into the solvent cup. You don't need to fill this whole solvent cup with throat lube, just the nut down inside where the pump rod comes through. What this does is prevents material from drying on the pump rod and damaging the upper seals. So we're going to pour a little bit in right now just to fill up that top. And now we'll be set to go as far as setting it up to spray with our lacquers. It's like the same process as when we flush. We're going to drop our pickup tube into the material. We're going to take the safety off the gun. We're going to turn on the air. And we're going to bring the fluid pressure up slowly until we get a nice even stream. You'll hear it start off fast again. You'll hear it slow down as it starts bringing the lacquer into the system. Once the air starts to get blown out of the system here, you'll see we'll get a nice steady stream of material. There'll still be a little bit of a wink or a pause in the pattern because we don't have a tip on the system, so don't be alarmed with that at this point. So once we have that nice steady stream of material coming through, we're ready to put on the air cap tip and air cap ring. Okay, we'll shut the main valve off, relieve the pressure, make sure the safety is on. And we're going to place our air cap and tip into the air cap. When you push this down, there's two grooves. You want to use the larger groove and push it against the pin and make sure it sits level and flat inside the air cap. Also, there's a white O-ring in the back of the tip. You want to make sure that O-ring is in the back of the tip before you start spraying. Otherwise, you're going to get material that's going to back through and come out the air cap air holes. So we'll place this on. And depending on which direction you like to spray, will determine which way the air cap ears are pointing. We'll set the ears going upright for this test. Tighten this down really good. And if the ears are up and down, your pattern's going to be sideways. If the ears are sideways, your pattern's going to go up and down.